Welcome everyone to the Rocket Company Intern panel. This is being organized by the WOA Member Advancement Committee. And so today we have brought to you 4 really cool panelists. They have all interned at really cool places, including Blue Origin, SpaceX, and United Launch Alliance. And so how this is going to work is that for the next hour, we're going to have them, we're going to start off with them introducing themselves, and they're going to tell us about what they did during their super cool internships. And then we will go into some pre-submitted questions. We got a lot of questions submitted from everyone. And so we tried to sort of make questions that encompass, a lot of what people, want to know, that like overwhelming things that a lot of people asked about. And then if you stick around until the end, there's a couple resources tagged along on our last slide for addressing some other questions that also popped up that are like adjacent to the content of this panel. So without further ado, we will start off with introductions. Whoa. Camber, if you want to go first.
Hi, my name's Camber. I'm a third-year aerospace engineering student at the University of Michigan, and I interned at SpaceX last summer with the crew mission management team, which is basically the closest thing they have to systems engineering. So I worked on kind of some really random projects in really different areas, but the main 2 were with Dragon trunk testing and Starlink user terminal mounts. And I'm actually going to be returning to SpaceX to join the Dragon propulsion team this summer.
Awesome. Very cool. All right, now Christina.
Hi, everyone. It is good to see everyone in the chat, in the Zoom room. My name is Christina. I am currently a 4th year at the University of Washington. I'm studying aeronautical astronautical engineering. Set to graduate this year, so super excited. I interned at Blue Origin in the test and launch engineering group. And I worked primarily with design engineers that worked on like test facility design for like on the structural and like fluid side of things. So my project was primarily centered around developing a fluid system for testing components on New Glen's 2nd stage, which was super exciting. And I interned under the Brick Owens Fellowship in summer 2020.
Awesome. Very cool. Next up, we have Michelle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle. I am a double major in aerospace engineering sciences and applied math. I'm also set to graduate this year, so very exciting. I'm at CU Boulder. During my Berkey summer, I was at SpaceX doing Crew Dragon mechanisms. So I was working primarily on the docking system supporting the in-flight abort, Demo 2, and Crew 1 missions. And so my mission flew just this past May, and that was really exciting. I was doing a lot of component testing and component design for the docking system. And then this past summer, I was at Blue Origin with the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship. And there I was on the Advanced Development Program team, which I think that's more, maybe I can't talk about as much. But I was working on the human spaceflight portfolio under advanced technologies and the habitat design work under advanced concepts. So I was a joint intern supporting both those programs, and it's a more space architecture effort.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I'm at Georgia Tech, majoring in aerospace, and I'm going to graduate in 2022. So a little bit more than a year left, but we're almost there. Last summer, I interned with ULA and the propulsion group for Centaur 5. So that's the upper stage of their new Vulcan Centaur vehicle. A lot of work on thrusters, a little bit in analysis and a little bit in design, and kind of switching between them. So it was a really neat internship.
Awesome. Very cool. All right, so now we're going to start to get into, again, the like pre-submitted questions that kind of, are either the most, usually just like the most popular ones that were, asked. And so we're going to start off with one, which is, what do you think is the most valuable skill, lesson, or insight you learned by interning for your company? And anyone is welcome to start off first for that one.
I guess I can start off really quickly. So my internship at Blue Origin was like my first internship and probably like my last internship, but like it was online during COVID, like pandemic time. And so like the main thing, like the most valuable thing that I've learned during that time was to like really step up in like staying connected. Like generally, like when you're in person, like or like so I think because I've never had like an in-person internship, but like generally like when you walk in, you like get to check in with your mentor and things like that. But like sort of like simulating that in like an online environment was really important. And just like even like in any sort of like intern experience, like making sure that you check in daily and like on the path and like ensuring that the path that you have moving forward is like sort of like a viable option. Like I'm doing this, this, and this. Like, is that okay? Like, should I be doing something else? Like, is this like a good thing to consider? And like, yeah, sorry.
I can go. I'm going to answer this for both my internships. I think at SpaceX, um, probably the most valuable insight that I got was confidence. I was terrified actually of being matched with SpaceX for my Brookie fellowship because it was also my first technical internship. And I had a lot of people tell me that, you know, like as a sophomore, you don't have the sufficient technical skills yet. And so that made me really nervous to intern for them. And I actually I had so many nightmares leading up to my internship. But throughout all of it, I would say like they they want to see that you're able to learn and that you're willing to learn. And I even though I heard that so many times before, I don't think I was able to embody that until I finished my internship and everyone's like, you did such a great job. And I was like, really? um, so I think that was a really great experience. It made me more confident as an engineer and as a person. And then I would say at Blue, I was like Christina, I was also remote. And I would say definitely like leadership, I think comes from in a lot of ways, but especially leadership and ownership over your own project is very important when you have the bandwidth to do so. Not every internship is going to have that kind of flexibility, but I was lucky that mine did. And I think maybe going along with that confidence piece, like knowing this is only because it was my second internship that I could do so, but knowing what I really wanted to work on and then being able to lay that out for the company so that they can integrate that into our project. It was our project, not just their project for me. And I think that was very important both for me to have and then also for the company to have, because when I'm excited about working on it, then I do much better work.
I think the most important thing you can know as an intern is that it's okay to ask for help. As an intern, no one expects you to know everything. They expect that what is on your resume, you'll have had some experience with that, but no one is expecting you to just come in and know how to do everything. And I think one of the most important things my boss told me this summer was people don't get fired from SpaceX for not doing something. They get fired for not getting something done. So you don't have to be the one doing it if you don't know how to do it. You just have to reach out for help.
Yeah, I can kind of follow up on that. I think the biggest skill that I learned was like balancing when you want to ask questions of someone else and when you want to kind of stick your head in a problem and figure it out on your own. So, I think that a lot of engineers are like, oh, I'm just going to figure out this problem. I'm just going to get it done. And, sometimes that's really good. And your managers will see that and be like, yes, she can stick with this problem and she can figure it out. But also knowing like when you need to ask for help and when it's going to be more beneficial to you and to the company to ask the older engineers who have more experience what's going on. And that balance is really hard to find. And it's something that is definitely a learning curve, but finding that balance throughout your internship is definitely really valuable.
If I can, I would like to give some more details on how to find that balance. So I think, so this is like very practical advice. I think weekly updates are really good for your team, not just your manager, but also like your mentors or anyone who's affiliated with your project. And with those, a list of priorities of what you're going to work on for the next week in order, so they can see if your priorities are straight, and that's very important. And then also having a notebook to take notes in so that when they tell you the first time, they don't have to repeat it again. Then I would say you can take maybe 1 to 2 like business days working, like really diving deep if you get stuck after 2 business days, I would say it's probably time to like reach out to your mentor and ask for help.
Awesome. That was great advice. The next question is a bit more like relating to applying to things. So one question that a lot of people were curious about is, what advice do you have for crafting like a standout resume or having a successful internship interview for a rocket company? And I think a lot of people, if anyone has any insight on, for example, like people who are maybe earlier on in college and maybe don't have as much experience, or maybe people who, for example, because of COVID, haven't gotten to do as much hands-on stuff. Like, I don't know if there are any things that you think might be helpful for people to keep in mind when applying for things.
I would say whatever experience you have, own it and don't belittle it. That was some feedback I got on my interview at SpaceX. Was I kind of talked down one of my experiences because it was like an academia thing, and it like I designed something, but I don't know if the project actually got to using it. Like I talked it down like that, and they told me, don't do that. So I think even if you don't have internship experience, you're getting some sort of lab experience through school most likely, or you're doing some sort of projects. So whatever it is, take it and try to talk about what lessons you learned from that.
Again, with the practical advice, I would say have numbers on your resume. Something that really helped me was like, if I could say I wrote software that increased efficiency by 75%, something like that is really helpful. Or you say like, I managed a team of 6 people. That's very concrete. And then also for interviews, it really depends on if you're doing a personal interview or a technical interview. For technical interviews, something that really helped me was finding someone who was willing to walk me through a technical interview at SpaceX. I had this guy that was a friend, and then he walked me through an interview, so that was really nice. And then for personal interviews, use the STAR method. Don't exactly remember what that stands for, but it's like you state like your problem, and then you talk about like what exactly you were trying to solve, and then how you contributed to that, and then what the outcome was. So always make sure that you have your own personal, like what you contributed part in it.
Yeah, I would just say a little bit more on the, like, if you're worried about getting experience, don't be afraid to, like, for your first internship or for some internships, get out of the aerospace community. I think it's really helpful, and it's kind of really hard when you are wanting to go into the aerospace because you're like, yes, like I want to work for this company and I want to work for this company. And, you know, getting your first internship can be very, very difficult. And so don't discount any experience that's outside of aerospace. My first internship was in lasers. And so, you know, you might not think like that's super applicable, but any experience that you have, like Camber said, like own it and tell them what you did. And, you know, anything that you do that makes you a better engineer, whether it's a personal project or an internship outside of the aerospace community, anything that, even if you don't think it's applicable, like could be the skill that they are looking for. So really don't be afraid to kind of branch out. Don't pigeonhole yourself into one thing that you think you want to do for the rest of your life. You know, experience some other things, and it might help you achieve that goal that you want.
I love that. Christina, before you go, can I just tag on really quickly? I did a program before SpaceX at the Colorado legislature, and I wrote science policy for a summer. And that was like so different, but I really played that up in my interview. And I was like, yeah, I know how to communicate, and I know how to do written and verbal communication. And like that, even if you don't think it's going to be a technical skill that you have, it just played up for sure.
Yeah, I feel like I have nothing but to like add on to this. Like, I definitely agree with that. Like, most of my experiences before my internship have been involved with like schoolwork and like extracurricular activities. Like, I got involved with like the rocket team at my university. I got involved with my SWEET chapter. So any experience is like great experience that'll give you that, like those level of soft skills, those understanding, that like level of understanding of like the development process for like an engineering project. Like, anything. And like, I personally really struggled with my communication. So like when I came to college, I knew that like I wanted to get involved in like this level of like leadership just because like it'll help me with my communication skills, and like it has like furthered me like so much because of that. And so like never look down on any experience that you have, because it'll like, if it helps you grow and it helps you learn, like you can say that, and it's like it's an awesome, like honestly all experience is awesome experience.
Also, I think, like Christina said, Rocket Team and any like technical project team is really good for your resume. But I actually want to say that you don't, like, personally, I do not like technical teams. Like our school's project, like Rocket Team, is kind of a hot mess. So I kind of like distance myself from that. And that's completely fine. Like you do not need to be on a technical project team. You don't need to force yourself to be on a technical project team in order to get an internship at a good company. I know that's a misconception that a lot of people have. But if you enjoy it, like by all means, go for it, but you don't need it.
Yeah, something a recruiter told me my freshman year was find something that you're interested in, go do it, and then get a leadership position in it. And that was like, it was a very like quick to the point, find something you're interested in. I don't care what it is, get into it, and then find a leadership position down the line. And that's, you know, I followed that, and that was some of the best advice I've ever gotten because it was very clear cut.
Yeah, I love this. Thank you guys for those answers. That's really helpful, especially because the recurring theme of the questions submitted is like worries about not having enough, you know, what exactly to do. And I feel like this touched like on all those realms. So thank you guys. The next question pertains to, you know, when looking at, you know, there's so many different rocket companies out there. And I guess if you guys had any thoughts on maybe deciding factors to keep in mind when people are looking at all the companies that are out there. For example, like, should people, you know, do you recommend looking at company culture? Do you recommend looking at, you know, how hands-on are like the project's going to be, et cetera? Are there any things that like you would keep in mind after your experiences going forward, looking for more internships?
I can start. So how I decided on SpaceX, I was actually pretty torn between Hawkeye 360, SpaceX, and Blue for my match. And so what I did was I like simplified those internships to these things. So Hawkeye would have been a company that I would have made the most impact in. SpaceX would have been the most difficult summer, and then Blue Origin would have been the most fun. And that was like what I perceived those companies to be. And then I asked myself like what I wanted out of those, and I was like, I decided I wanted a challenging summer and I wanted to grow the most as an engineer. I decided not fun. I was like, fun can be for later. I need to be challenged right now. And so that was how I ended up deciding. I think a couple of other things that are maybe secondary for other people, but pretty important for me now that I have been at a couple of companies. Location, like I love LA. I love being able to surf and go out on the weekends. Like that's super important for me. Seattle was really great. Both of those locations are great. The company culture, I think, is important, but don't let that detract you, because I would say the team culture is above all else. Like team culture, hands down, like that is what I look for. I think having a good team, having a manager who can both support you and then push you, that is so important and very hard to find, and or hard to know until you're actually there. But if you see any like red flags, you're like, oh, this is an awkward conversation, or like I'm not sure if we click, like just be wary of that. It might just be because you're over the phone, but that is a very important part. So I would say like team culture for me, like that's the hands down. And then also if they have like they do nice things for their interns, like oh they pay to ship your car across country, like that's a bonus. Sometimes that can just speak to how much they care about their interns though. So I think that's also very important to keep in mind, like pay and then also any benefits you have, because that'll usually speak to like how much they involve the interns in different activities over the summer.
Anyone else have any thoughts? We can always move on to the next one as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of questions about like interviews, and I know that they're really stressful. And I think one of the best things that you can do is ask questions after the interview. And so that's a really good way to gauge some of these things that, especially Michelle was talking about, like the company culture and the team culture. And one of the questions that I like to ask is, what is your intern's role? So is it I'm in charge of a project? Michelle mentioned it earlier. Like sometimes you do get that experience of you are in charge of this project. This is your project. You're running it. Are you helping out, different groups that you get to choose? When I was at ULA, my manager sat me down the first day and said, hey, what do you want to work on? And he listed like 3 or 4 things for me to choose from. And that's, very different from a company that has a project set out for you. Not better than the other, but it's something that you kind of need to know, like, oh, this is something that I'm going to like I want to be in charge of one big project. I want a lot of small projects throughout the summer. And so that's a really good question to ask them, because a lot of times their answer will be very indicative of how they're going to manage you this summer. So if they kind of don't have a great answer and they're like, oh, like, I don't know, like you kind of are like, okay, like maybe you aren't ready for an intern, something like that. So that's like a really good question to ask that person who will be in charge of your group that summer too.
Yeah, adding on to that, I'd say overall, if you have options, you can think about whether the project at that company is exactly what you want to do. Because sometimes it's in a very different field. Like I'm not a mechanical engineer, but my job at SpaceX was mechanical. And that was because I didn't really have the standing to ask for anything else. But if you have more experience or if you have a better idea of exactly what you want to do, then maybe that's something you can leverage to say, at this company, they're offering me exactly what I want, but at this company, they're not. And like, that's something different.
Cool. Any other thoughts that you want to move? We can move on to the next one.
I guess I can add like just a quick thought. So in terms of like, like factors for like what sort of like companies to look for. So I guess like the main thing to sort of consider is like the size of the company in terms of like, like is it going to be like a startup, like a smaller scale company that you're going to work at, or is it going to be like a large company that has like a very set sort of like structure to their internship program, and sort of like what you like Michelle mentioned, like what you sort of want to get out of it. So like definitely like startup is going to be like more reliance on you in terms of like less sort of like oversight on like what you're specifically doing. And then like larger scale company, there's going to be a lot more structure to like what you're going to be doing. And so like it will definitely sort of like help guide you in terms of like the resources that you have. But like sort of like those considerations are like really key in terms of like looking into companies.
Awesome. Very solid advice. This next one is kind of, I guess, about like once you get, a cool rocket company internship, what do you think, what is the learning curve like? Like, in your experience, was it like quite steep? And what advice would you give to a new intern at your company? Like if you could go back and you saw a new day one intern, what would you say to them?
I think this is an interesting question because I never classify learning curves at companies to be steep or not. It's just as steep as you can make it. Like for you personally, just go as fast as you can go. At least that's always been like my personal goal. I would say expectations are certainly somewhat different at companies. For me, SpaceX was definitely like as fast as I could go, and then that was probably like max. Even if they wanted me to do more, I couldn't do any more. I did have to learn CAD in a week, and I think that was like the fastest I've ever learned anything. I didn't know CAD before. So that was pretty cool. I'm really glad I had the chance to do that. And then at Blue, it was just different because I was on a research project instead. Advice for new interns at companies. Maybe I'll circle back to me on that. I'll think about that.
Actually, in terms of advice, I think try to get out of it what you want to get out of it. And depending on your mentor or your supervisor, you might actually be able to ask for maybe not specific assignments, but if you say that you want to do something more technical, they might be able to help you do something more technical. And that's something that depends on the culture, but maybe that's something you want to look for in a company culture too, the ability to move around a little bit.
Okay, I have something. You inspired me, Camber. I would say meet with one new person every week for lunch. And that's been my go-to at companies. And you should try to have them be outside of your specific discipline. It's really cool. A lot of people do really cool stuff. And it's also a great way to get to know people whose teams you might be interested in coming back to. And then you already have a connection there.
I did that, so do that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like the points mentioned before. So actually when I was going into my internship at Blue, I like called up Michelle and I was like, I'm so scared, like I don't know what to do. Like this company is just like so amazing and the people are so awesome. Like I was really in my own headspace. And like Michelle was just like, calm down. Like just like they picked you for a reason and like just go forward, like try to get out of your own headspace and like really open yourself up to like talking with other people, like and take it as like a learning experience. Like everything you're gonna like be going into is going to be like sort of like a slight learning jump just because you're learning something like potentially something like entirely new. And just take it in as a learning experience, like take those notes, take like and just like make sure that you're able to sort of like be able to like move forward. But like everything you're going to be doing is like sort of like going to be a part of that learning experience, and just like making sure that you're just like enjoying that, and like being able to ask questions and just move forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think one of the things that's helped me with that, especially, is like knowing that you are an intern and they hired you to teach you. Like a big thing about internships is that you're learning, and you're learning a lot on the job in a very short amount of time. And so you kind of have that grace of like, hey, I'm a third year, or I'm a second year who's at this like aerospace company that people have been working at for 5, 10, 15 years. So kind of not having that expectation that you should know everything and going into it and I'm trying to learn and I'm trying to pick up new skills and, learn about something that you're really interested in. If you're, at an internship somewhere, it's because you wanted to be there and it's because they want you there. And so when that happens, you got to take that opportunity and you got to make the most of it and ask as many questions as you can. Even about things that aren't specific to your project. Engineers are very happy to talk about what they do. Some engineers, you wouldn't think that they would want to talk that much, but you ask them a question that they're interested about and they'll go off for hours. So that's definitely like my biggest advice is just ask people about their projects and ask people about things that you're interested in, because you'll find the people that are interested in the same things as you. And it's one of the best things ever.
I know I mentioned notebooks earlier, but if you have a personal rule of don't make, like, if someone teaches you something once, like they should only have to teach you once. And I think that if you can embody that and embrace that, it'll make you very, very efficient. Even if you do end up having to ask them like 2 times, just having that personal rule, I think it'll make your work seem very thoughtful and efficient to people.
Awesome. Our next question here is kind of, I guess, you've all sort of generally touched on this a bit in some of your previous answers, but people were curious to know, like, if you recommend any specific skills to develop in order to be a successful intern, which, again, I feel like generally, some of your questions have touched on that, or answers have touched on that, but maybe, I saw a few people who submitted about, like, for example, if your job is going to involve CAD and you've never done CAD before, like, what is your stance on, for example, learning CAD before you start your internship or something, or, things like that? What is your thoughts on that after doing your internships?
Go ahead.
I think anything you can learn on your own ahead of time is really good. There are lots of ways to, um, so SpaceX uses NX, which is like a really expensive program. So if you've never done CAD before, you're probably not going to start with that, but there are lots of free CAD programs out there that are similar. And once you learn one CAD program, um, adjusting to another isn't terribly difficult. So, and if you know that you're going to be using something in advance, then and you have the time, then I would definitely recommend learning whatever you can, especially now with COVID when there's it can be harder to get other types of experience.
Personally, I do not like learning skills on my own. Like I've tried so many of those like open ed courses for like Python and I just like never finish them. So personally, I don't learn anything in advance. I just kind of learn them as I go. And I'm confident in knowing that I can learn things very quickly. So it's different for everyone. So just do what makes you feel most empowered in knowing like if it is having that skill in advance or knowing that you can learn it when you're there. I would say the single, maybe it's not a skill, but like single trait to be successful is humility. Like that's it. I think that is all you need to be successful, constantly being able to be wrong, being able to like to be able to be so sure in your answer that you don't need confidence, you just have like the math to back it up. I think that, and then like the willingness to learn, which also comes from, the humility of knowing that you don't know everything. I think that's very important.
One thing I would say is like kind of going off what Michelle was talking about, being able to learn is knowing how to be resourceful. So you're not going to have all the answers, and even people at the company that you're working with aren't going to have the answers all the time. So knowing how to look in a textbook and say, okay, I'm trying to size this valve and I have no idea how to do that. How do I go to a source material, read through it, and then learn how to use that? It doesn't have to be immediate, but being comfortable with reading through materials and Googling things and trying to figure like things out like that has been probably the most important skill that I've had to develop, because like we've said before, you're not going to know everything. So kind of developing how to figure things out that you don't know is going to be really helpful.
I also thought of another one, first principles thinking, something they love at SpaceX. And this is something you can practice all the time. So before my technical interviews, I would always get very like panicked and then try to learn everything in class. Like, okay, like this airfoil is like that, but why? But why? But why? So you should be doing that all the time. Sometimes it just takes so much energy that I only do it before interviews, but it's something really good to practice if you have your physics and math down right. And then if you can practice how to move from the basic principles to your answer, I think that'll serve you very well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like all those points. I additionally, I like sort of like as a one-off, but I definitely recommend like building on like your project management skills. So like your ability to like work in teams with like different projects or like just handling, like your own personal project, just like understanding like there's like sort of like a timeline to those things, like communication with people, like working in teams is just like so important when you're just like being an intern at a company, like being able to communicate and like ask questions when needed. And like honestly, those skills are just like sort of, I feel like they're a little bit undervalued just because like, like you kind of expect them, but like personally, I have a lot of issues with like, I used to have a lot of issues with communication. And so like being able to just like, like consider those things in my head going forward, like what questions should I be asking? Like what considerations do I need to like sort of like be able to complete this project, and like how should I be moving forward?
Perfect. All right. Very cool. So we have one more pre-submitted question before we get to touch on a few questions in the chat. But so this question is kind of, I guess, sort of a chance to share maybe a story, if you have one about, one that sticks out in your head from your internship, what is the most exciting, inspiring, and or challenging part of your internship, or for Michelle, internships, if you want to share 2 stories or something, I don't know. But if you guys have like one thing that really sticks out in your mind that from your entire experience.
I got to be in SpaceX mission control for Demo 2 Splashdown, so that was really cool. But I think like the coolest thing I did was I owned hardware that got shipped out while I was there, basically. So it was cool to see the whole process and to have like owned that.
Okay. I think for my SpaceX internship, honestly, every day I was in the clean room was really exciting. It was so cool. Like hardware is just something else. I was always kind of like skeptical. I was like, oh, engineers just love hardware. That's a cliche. But like once I got there, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. So being able to like tour clean rooms, I had a launch on my 3rd day there and definitely cried. Like it was so moving and inspiring. One of the most memorable parts about my internship was actually after we were I was there with Katie Curl, who was a previous brookie and an intern with SpaceX, and we watched together in May 2020 the Demo 2 launch that we had both worked on, and we just like cried, and it was so great to be able to watch with someone else who worked at SpaceX, even in the middle of pandemic. So that was also just really, it was just an amazing moment. At Blue Origin, I would say everything about my my ownership of the project, and how I was able to like move the project and present to so many people. Like I presented to VPs and astronauts, and really anytime I got to interview an astronaut for my project was probably like one of the coolest things. And then having an astronaut be like, oh, like please invite me to your final presentation, I would love to see what this looks like. I'm like, oh my God, like is this real life? So yeah, those are my 2.
Yeah, I definitely cried on like both internships, like my first one and like last summer when I first started, because I was just so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, like I finally did it. And then ULA launched Mars 2020 while I was there. So that was pretty sick to be like, wow, I'm working for this company and they're sending something to Mars today. Like that's crazy. And then every time some engineer would like make some comment about like, oh, this thing that's going to be flying at this time, like it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm actually working at a company that I've, wanted to work for. I'm working in an industry that I've wanted to work for. And it's just kind of those little one-off things that you do as an intern where you're helping people with things and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is insane. And I think that's kind of like the big thing for me.
Something very small that happened at SpaceX. Well, I guess not very small. The first part that I marked, like Ref A, which is a flight part, like that was a very exciting moment for me to like first put out my drawing for a flight part.
I wouldn't say it's like the most exciting thing, but like at the end of like when my internship was like starting to wrap up, like the primary thing that you do is like in terms of just like housekeeping is like what things can you sort of like put on your resume and like what can you present sort of like in terms of like what you did for your work. And so like I sent it over to like my mentors and like my manager to check over, and they're like, whoa, wait, Christina, like you did so much awesome things and like so many awesome things, like you delivered this design, like you need to like show that you did this awesome work. And so it was just sort of like a validation, and just made me all like like excited and just like happy inside that like my mentors and like my manager recognized like the work that I did, even though like I didn't. And so like it really helped me sort of like understand like the scope of the things that I did, and it was really nice.
These are all extremely wholesome stories. Thank you for sharing. These made me happy. Okay, well, cool. These are all of our pre-submitted questions. I've been looking at the ones that have been being sent in the chat, and one that I noticed that I thought was pretty relevant was like, I guess going back to like internship, like um, going back to interviews, like more specifically technical interviews, because I feel like at rocket companies specifically, like these technical interviews are a big, like pretty prevalent. Do you guys have any advice for like, because I know Michelle, you touched on like the first principle stuff. Does anybody else have any advice or like additional thoughts on how to, I guess, get ready for a technical interview? Maybe like, does anybody here like make it like a little cheat sheet beforehand to like review like really quick or anything? Like, does anyone have like strategies that they used for their technical interview if you did one?
Yeah, so what I did was I basically annotated my resume and basically went through and wrote out all of the details for every single like line of my resume just to refresh everything. Because sometimes you're like, yeah, I did this 2 years ago and I don't really remember all the details behind it. And you're going to get asked about things on your resume and you should know all of the details like with that bullet point or with that, like Michelle was talking about with that number. So if you put something on there, you're like, yeah, like I increased it by 75%, like be ready to talk about that. And then the best advice that I've ever gotten was to talk through your thought process. So they're going to answer or they're going to ask you a question and you might not know the answer right off the bat. A lot of times you don't. They'll ask you something and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not entirely sure. But if you sit there and you kind of say, okay, I'm thinking about this question, this is how I'm going to try to get to the answer. And even if you never get to the correct answer or any answer, they're going to watch you like talk through your process and know that you can think through problems. And that's mostly what they're looking for in technical interviews, is seeing that you can work through problems, that you can think through things. And that's definitely the best advice that I've ever gotten. And I've practiced that, like Michelle said, with like in classes of, thinking through my process instead of just kind of giving a gut answer. Is okay, why? Like, how did I arrive at this answer? Can I explain, the thought process that led me there, the first principles and stuff like that? And once you start practicing that, you'll get way better at it. And then the people that interview you will be really impressed because it's not something that people really practice in engineering. Like they think that you should just know the answer, but it's really just about thinking.
Going off of the process, if you can first like identify the problem and then give your governing principles. So these are things like Bernoulli's principle, but then you have to be also give a governing equation. I think SpaceX just loves that. They love the principle and then the equation. They have to go hand in hand. So say like, oh, the ideal gas law, but then you have to be able to say like PV equals nRT. To prepare for that, I would say, depending on the position you're interning or you're applying for, I really like to brush up on my structures and mechanisms, especially like beam bending theory, and then like loading and dynamics. Those are pretty important and very common for interview questions. Like beam bending is classic. And then aerodynamics. Blue has these set of, I'm not going to tell you what they are, but they have these set of aerodynamics questions, and you should be pretty familiar, like for an aerospace interview, if you're doing more like aerospace-y things, just be familiar with aerodynamics principles and be able to talk through those in applications.
Yeah, so like to prepare for interviews, generally I just like pull out all of the cheat sheets that I have from every one of my class and just like sort of go through them to understand like the primary principles. Like if I have I just have like my thermodynamic sheet and I'm just like looking through all like the primary equations of like and like the energy laws. And like it really helps me in like sort of like gaining that level of confidence to answer questions because like Michelle mentioned, like it's primarily like a process of like, do you understand those fundamentals? Like, are you like backing them with like specific like principles and like equations and things like that? And additionally, like when I also prepare for like interviews, I also just like walk through like specific, just like random questions about like, like some technical questions and just like walk them through like out loud. And just like say my entire process just to give me like confidence going forward. So like even if they ask me just like this entirely different question, like you just have an understanding of like sort of like how you're going to proceed. And also, like, if they do ask you a question that sort of like makes you stumble a little bit, it's okay to like ask for a second. Like, that's a great question. Like, can I get like an additional second to just like think about that really quickly? And just like taking a deep breath and just like walking that through in your mind and just proceeding forward.
Something I kind of learned from experience was at the end of every interview, they're going to ask you if you have any questions for them. And I've felt a lot better on the interviews when I went in with a couple of solid questions that I wanted to ask at the end, because that shows that you're interested in the company. And I don't know, just doing that preparation kind of helps, I think.
One final thing that I'm going to say is be nice to your interviewers, please. It'll get you really far if you ask about their day. One of seriously, one of like the biggest things is they'll be like, "Hi, how are you today?" And I'll be like, "I'm great. Like, how are you doing?" And that just kind of like breaks down that wall for a second, because they're like, "Oh, I'm good. Like, thank you." And then you can kind of get into the actual like interview section, and it becomes more of a conversation. And it feels a little less one-sided than someone sitting on the other side of the phone asking you a random question and you just sitting there like, I don't know. So definitely be nice and be a person, because you're a person too. You're not just an encyclopedia that's supposed to answer things.
Be very, very polite to your interviewers and your recruiters. Like, they decide your fate. So, and they do so much. And internship managers just do so much for you guys. So,
Very true. Great advice all around. Another question that I see in the chat here, it was sent twice. It was about, we kind of touched on this a little bit before, but like for freshmen, just starting college, maybe didn't even haven't really had the time yet to even get into a club quite yet, or like even, or get like a leadership position, or develop some essential skills yet. What kind of internship positions would you suggest freshmen maybe apply to if they have an interest in eventually at some point doing a rocket company internship?
Honestly, I think anything. My first internship was in automotive. You just need some sort of technical experience, or even not necessarily technical, if it's at least technical communication, anything to get you into the industry, basically. And it's all good experience.
I think the easiest position for me to get in was systems. There's like very light systems engineering if you don't have any technical experience, and then very like difficult systems engineering later down the road. But I think that's a very accessible place, because it's where you can use a lot of interpersonal and organization skills, as opposed to having to know a lot about one specific topic. Something else people find, I think, easier to get into is maybe software, just because every first year takes a coding class. So if you have that, then theoretically you should be able to like build on your MATLAB or Python skills.
Yeah, and one last thing I would say is check with your universities. There's a lot of like opportunities there. I know that, Georgia Tech has a lot of labs on campus that, you can work at over the summer for pay as an intern. And so kind of finding professors that are looking for undergraduate students to work over the summer is a really good experience. And it's something that is a little bit more accessible, because you are at the college, you are, talking to these people. So that's kind of a good first place to start. And also professors know a lot of people. So talk to your professors, talk to, other students at your school that have found success in finding internships, because they'll know where to tell you to go. So really just like asking questions and looking for any opportunity. Like Camber said, she found one in the automotive. I did lasers. Don't kind of pinhole yourself into just aerospace or even just engineering. It's a really valuable experience to get other experience.
Awesome. Yeah. This is a question that actually I noticed like two kind of similar things were sent in some of the most recent RSVPs for this event. People were asking about, do you think that networking is important for getting a job at a rocket company? I think, especially, you guys are at these three really cool big companies. Like, do you think it's like, is it essential to be networking, or can you just do it once you get your first foot in the door, and like you said, do like the lunches with coworkers? Like, what is your thoughts? How did you use networking in getting internships, if at all?
Personally, networking for me, has been primarily just like a form of like getting comfortable with talking with other people, like learning about the company specifically. It definitely does help you in terms of like understanding like the type of work that a person does on a daily basis, and like being able to network with people and like just have that level of understanding is really important. And just like shows that you have that level of interest in the company, and like understanding like this is a place that like I think I would work well in, and like the company culture is definitely something that I like would vibe with. And like yeah, I personally think like I haven't specifically reached out and networked with people for the purpose of like like finding an internship, but rather like finding information and like sort of having that understanding of like the company.
So I networked within SpaceX to get my return offer, but networking is definitely still a skill that I'm working on, and I didn't actually have much of a network until I got into this fellowship. So I think down the road it can be really useful, but getting into your first, especially getting into your first position, I think most people get their first positions through someone they know, but it's definitely possible to do it without it.
I would actually say first positions are usually through like luck and skill. And then for at least for me, like SpaceX was just like purely through luck and skill. And then every other internship since then and like position since then have all been network offers. Like people will just come to me and be like, hey, like, are you interested in this job? Like, can we talk? So for me, I definitely utilize my network to where I don't think I've applied for a job like in a couple of years, just because I have a pretty solid network that I can reach out to, and like people I keep my relationships good enough so that like at SpaceX one of my mentors is like now a manager and like talking about a return offer with other teams for me. So I think it spans the realm. It just depends on like where you want your network to be. You can really utilize them in any way.
I actually got my first position through like really random stuff on my resume. My interviewer was from Europe, and I had a couple of foreign languages on there, and she did martial arts, and I had my black belt on my resume. So put the stuff that makes you human on your resume too, I think, because yeah, it was kind of luck and random stuff that got me my first position.
That's so cool. You have a black belt? Oh my gosh. Oh man. All right. Well, I'm really quickly, because I know there's that quite both people submitted questions about international opportunities. Also, they submitted questions about opportunities for high schoolers. So before we end everything, I wanted to share this little resource slide at the end. So WOA has this little career repository, massive Excel sheet. And so you can find it at the WOA website. Sorry, I know my slides are kind of lagging. I don't know why, but it'll pop up in a second here. It's the WOA official website, .org/resources. And there's a tab there on the main website as well. And so that has tons of aerospace companies listed there, small and large, with links to their website. Yes, thank you. It is just sent in the chat, so you can click it really easily. There's also opportunities for high schoolers, a tab for that. There's a link to an external resource guide for international students specifically, which is equally as awesome. And then there's tabs for fellowships, scholarships, awards. So it's really highly suggest that for resources for looking into places to apply to and just like opportunities. And then down here at the bottom also is a plug for Brooke Owens Fellowship, because all four of our panelists had at least one of their internships through the Brooke Owens Fellowship, and they're all Brookies. And so that's also a really cool way. Again, we're talking about some networking stuff. It's a really great way to, meet people and just see what's out there. And you learn about a lot of really cool companies through it. So highly suggest looking into that as well. But yeah, so with that, I feel like we're coming up on our 7 o'clock time, and I don't want to feel like one more question will push us over the edge, but I think we can maybe, if anyone wants, does anyone
I
want
was gonna say I can stay on to answer remaining questions because it's in the day for me, so I'm pretty flexible.
Perfect, yeah. Yeah, if anyone has any lingering questions, I know there are some other more specific, more specific ones in the chat. Sorry, I'm trying to read through them all.
It's okay, don't apologize, guys. This one thing I really want everyone to learn, especially for women, like stop apologizing. We always do that, or we say like, oh, does that make sense? Yes, you make sense. You were perfectly concise. Stop apologizing, Shannon. You did great. And Sarah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, this was a very cool panel. And I mean, if for any of our panelists or any of our participants that need to drop off, feel free. This is kind of the end of the main questions. But again, yeah, if anyone wants to stick around, ask more questions in the chat.
The Brooke Owens Fellowship is for anyone in your undergrad years. So even if you're a senior, you can still apply. Thanks, everyone. You can find me on LinkedIn. I should just be under Michelle Lynn, or you can find me on Twitter. I'll drop my handle here.
Great Twitter account. Definitely follow.
Thanks, Sarah.
Oh yes, and there is a recording. We are recording the session. So for anyone who maybe, I'll just send it to the emails that RSVP'd, or wherever this link will go. It'll at least go to whoever submitted their email in the form. So no problem.
If anyone had any other questions they wanted to ask, you can just come off mute and ask it.
Yeah, I mean, we still have like 28 participants, so there's definitely still interest.
Hi, I have a question. I have an internship this summer and I know what team I'm working with, but I don't know what specific project I'll be working on. So I'm not sure what to study or shore up in the interim between now and this summer. So did you guys reach out to like previous internship classes before you started at your respective companies? Or did you reach out to your teams before entering to see how much of your coursework already applied versus what you needed to learn?
I think, like I said, I was pretty confident that I was going to be able to learn anything on the job. So I did ask about if I can prepare anything in advance. Like when I accepted my offer, I would ask like, oh, like once you let me know, like my team, let me know also if there's things I should read up on. Usually though, like that's like off the job time, and like you shouldn't, personally, I think everything that an intern does should be paid for. Like it's setting a good precedent. Like you should be paid for your work. So I tried not to do too much like before or like out of work time for my internships. That's my answer.
I think if it's like something that you're like a little like stressing over, it would definitely be okay to just like ask and reach out to your team and your manager if like there's any resources that would be helpful going in. But yeah, like when I got like my team assignment, it was like less than a week before my internship started, and that's how generally like Blue does like operate in terms of like weeks before. And so like I didn't have like a clue, but like I, in terms of like, you know, like other forms of preparation, I try to like mentally prepare myself like going in, and just like thinking through like you know, like I can do this, like try to go in with a little bit more confidence and like understanding of like, you know, how should I proceed. And like I reached out to Michelle to talk with her, and she like recommended that I like, you know, like network with people and like chat with people once per week too. And so like definitely having that level of confidence going in terms of like chatting with previous interns and like interns currently there is actually pretty nice too, and like building that community before you head in.
Thank you.
Oh, there is a question in the chat. So what would you recommend for a person with an introverted personality to like improve their networking skills? Anyone want to answer?
I'm probably as extroverted as it gets, so maybe someone else can take that.
And I'm introverted, but still figuring that out. So I think people are really approachable when you approach them with questions about stuff they're doing and excited about though. So if like I wouldn't just reach out to people about jobs, I would try to reach out on the premises of I'm really interested in your work. Could you tell me more about it?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I accidentally like unmuted myself. And like I also have a really introverted personality. And so like don't be scared to just like reach out to someone because they'll always be like, as like it was mentioned before, but like engineers will always be open to like talking about their work and getting like and always just like be open to like talking with people. But like I think it's just a matter of like like learning about what they're doing and like being able to just like chat with them about that rather than like networking specifically about like jobs and things like that. Sorry, my family's being loud in the background.
Yeah, there is another question as well. I think Shannon, you're gonna say it. So I'll let you go.
Yeah, it says when you have a non-technical internship and want to gain technical experience or at least context during remote internship, do you have any like tips for that?
I would say my first contact in the aerospace network was Phil Larson, who some of you may know. He's a Berkey mentor and absolutely awesome. He taught a space policy class at my school, but he was only in the aerospace like network because he had worked at SpaceX previously. So like there are a lot of policy people who've worked previously at companies and like you can network with them that way. But I would say honestly, like if you live in a big-ish city where they do like monthly, they should have monthly aerospace happy hours. If you really are interested in networking, like you can go to those. There's quite a few professionals that attend. And then also like your suite chapters or any other professional engineering chapters that you may be in is also a good way to network. I'm seeing this question in the chat from Megan about declining an offer if you have already accepted. And I'll just like give you my thoughts on this. I had an offer from ULA, but I didn't accept it and I had to decline it, which is like not as big of a deal, but it really depends on different people have different opinions on this. So I'm going to give you my opinion. If you have already accepted an offer, I would say, for my opinion, it's very rude to turn it down. If someone has a different opinion and like a great way to go about it, please let me know. But what I've been taught is that if you have already accepted, unless you have like a really good reason, you shouldn't like reject it for another offer. It's just kind of not, it's been taught to me that that was not acceptable. And the aerospace world is so small, and like every decision you make, especially among recruiters, because they all talk, that really matters. So if it's not like you must have accepted for a reason, and like try to find the joy in that. And then maybe you can like push your other internship off a semester or a year, and you can still do both. But if there's a way to not just like go flat out and like rescind on that acceptance, I would find that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like if you already accepted the offer, it wouldn't be in like sort of like the best, like I don't know, like the connection wouldn't be like sort of the best in the end if you were to just like reject that offer. I have like heard some experiences about like people that have had like that were on like a really short timeline for their offer deadline, and then received like another offer that they knew that was where they wanted to work, and so they were able to like reject that offer. Like, but then in that case, like I think that would be okay, but like also it kind of just depends on the situation.
Yeah, I think you need a way like how much you want that internship, like this the job of your dreams, and like are you okay with never speaking to that company again? Because that's what you have to be ready for and have to accept if you do make that decision.
Yeah, I'm not a panelist, but I'm sure that if the company wanted you once, I'm sure that, I mean, hopefully if you have like another summer, they would, you know, it's not like they'd completely understand that you had already accepted something, but like you just, I feel like there's really great, like easy, nice ways to respectfully decline an offer, but like still indicate like I'm still really interested in you as a company, and you know, I hope we can stay in touch. And then you apply again, and they've already wanted you one time. I'm sure they would want you again, you know, one summer, or you know, the summer in between hopefully won't be too bad. But
Yeah, that's definitely what I would say. I would say just if you like have to do it, or you know, if you really think that it's something that's best for you, just be nice about it and be upfront. Um, you know, I've been in a position where I've had to decline offers, and it's like, you know, you just have to say exactly what Shannon said. Yeah, like I really like your company. Like it's just that, you know, in my career, I'm trying to figure things out and I don't really know like what I want to do, what I'm doing, you know, stuff like that. And say, you know, be open and upfront with them about your situation. And if it's, you know, like Michelle said, if this is a internship that you really, really want, like I wouldn't say that it's the end of the line for rejecting the other one, but don't just say, you know, see ya, never want to talk to you again. Like, you know, really do be open and upfront about it and say, hey, yeah, and the faster that you can do it, tell them, and, you know, just say, hey, like, I'm really, really sorry that it had to happen like this, but, you know, it's your life, and, you know, you also can't spend your entire life worrying about what other people are thinking. So
True. You just have to be ready. You have to accept the possibility that you can, like the worst case will happen. Once
right.
you've accepted that and you're okay with it, then like yeah, by all means go for it.
Mm-hmm.
any other questions from the chat?
In response to the technical experience one, I think there are just lots of ways to get technical experience. I don't know what your internship looks like, but if there's any way to move around within the company, sometimes they can be receptive to that. And if not, then maybe you're only working 40 hours a week and you can work on personal projects outside of work, because and that built a lot of companies view personal projects that are technical as experience too.
Yeah, I would say those are like the things that you should think about before deciding to go at a company is their flexibility in projects. Personally, I really like to multitask, which means like SpaceX was great because they take a whole person approach and they say like whatever skills you have, like bring them to the table and we'll find something for you to work on. Whereas Blue is more like solution based and they will put you in a project, which people just like different things. So also intern experiences are different than full-time experiences. Like at Blue, everyone works on everything, but not interns. Just interns, they only work on one project, but everyone else is like super busy. So it really just depends on your position, and then just know that. I think there's a question on if SpaceX was as hard as people say it is. That's funny. I think SpaceX is everyone says it is. It's everything everyone says it is. Like, is it hard? Yes. Is it super fun and exciting? Yes. Like everything you've heard is true to some extent. It just really depends on what aspects of the company you choose to associate with. For me, I really like the fast pace and the excitement. The stress was definitely there. Like I did not sleep that well until maybe like July or August when I got used to it. I'm very like sensitive to stress of projects. But it's also like there's a lot of camaraderie because the stress is so high. So everyone like feels like they're in it together. It really depends. I would say though, if you have a chance to work at SpaceX, definitely take it. It's definitely one of those things that will teach you a lot about yourself if you hate it or if you love it or indifferent.
I think your experience is also pretty team dependent too. Like there are teams that are definitely friendlier than others. So I don't know. I don't know what you're looking for, but it can be everything that intense. But there are also people with kids and external lives, and they make it work. So
Yeah, my manager worked from like 9 to 4 and he was gone at like always. And so yeah, it depends. You have a chill team. A manager who can act as a shield. Oh, well, this is very specific for vehicle engineering, maybe getting a little too specific, but a manager who can act as a shield to like all like the weird stuff that's like happening in the engineering world is like really valuable.
So I have a quick question that I don't know if any of you will be able to answer, but I want to hear your opinion anyway. So I have depression, but it's well managed. But every time I apply, they're like, do you have a disability? Yes or do not answer. Do any of you have any advice? Because I don't want to lie to the company, but I don't want them to think that they shouldn't hire me, you know?
do they look at that? I thought that was just for like statistics for the government.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's also statistics. I also have depression and generalized anxiety, but I don't ever say that to the company. I just say, I think I either say no or do not answer. Personally, I don't think mental illness is a disability. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't know it was categorized that way. So maybe that's why I never put it in.
In the list, it says it, and I'm like, oh man, you know, I almost got away with it, but.
You can just say prefer not to answer if you don't want to answer. I don't think companies care about that or look at it.
Okay, I didn't know they didn't really look at it, so that's good to know.
All right, Shannon, you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for sticking around to answer the remaining Q&A chat questions, and thank you to everyone who is still here participating. But yeah, thank you guys all for coming, especially for our panelists. Ooh, yay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, bye everyone. Have a good night.